You want to hear something really stupid?
Sure, I always like to hear things that are really.
Looking at your name, I realize that it includes two first names. I never knew that you had another Sue in your name. I just always thought your name was Kayla.
Really?
Yep, and that's the something stupid with which I start all interviews, I suppose.
But yes, I was born legally Susan Kayla Aaron. Kayla was my great grandmother. It's my Yiddish name.
Okay.
So legally, I didn't change it until like maybe 5 years ago. People just always called me Kayla. I went with that because I liked it. I preferred it, but I never bothered to change it.
Okay, well, Kayla, it is. Welcome to another episode of Fair Folk at Work. When you're at fair and you watch a parade, everybody seems to have a place. There's the soldiers, there's the queen, and then there's the nobles. And then there's all these other people that you're not quite sure what they're doing there, but they're sort of before the peasants and between the nobles. My guest today is one of those people between the nobles and the peasants, here to explain, perhaps, what they're doing is my good friend, Kayla Aarons. Kayla?
Well, thanks, Dan. I'm really honored to be here. This is fun and kind of special because we're a special group of people.
I've never had an interview before with somebody in their car, so we're already defining new spaces. So thank you very much. So I'll just jump right into it. Who's the person who say to you, there's this thing called fair. Let's go check it out. And what did they say to you to get you out there?
The first person is the ever famous Janice Cooper. She said, "It'll be really fun. Really. You'll be happy. You'll be happy you did this." And I had been at fair as a child, with my parents in the very early when it started, like in the 60s, I think.
Right.
But that was just like, you take your kids, you visit. It's not like we went there with any regularity. So yes, as an adult, I would say definitely Denny's. And she's very good at getting people to do things.
What prompted her or you to migrate to the parts of fair that you ended up in?
I think for me, I'm certainly enamored of the court, but I wanted to be able to move around the fair freely, and I didn't want a costume that weighed, 20 pounds. As playing a servant, which is what I was, a seamstress to Lord Burleigh's court, you get to move around. You get to be with the peasants and be with the nobility and go where you want. So we're in between.
Do you remember who in the court first struck you as the person you wanted to attach yourself to and why?
I don't know. That's a hard question. I played off a lot with the other servants, Malcolm Moncrief. We did a lot of fun acting together, a lot of being improvisational, running around the fair and at the court. So I guess Malcolm, we're kind of close then. I don't remember exactly how I met everybody else in our group. Kind of happens because fair is like a big party. And you're at it. And then you're at it later at night, too.
Was there any moment that you looked around at fair and went, this is a place I can see myself hanging out in?
Oh yeah. No, even the first time that I went there and I wasn't really in fair costume, I was in, I don't know if you're familiar with Jessica McClintock dresses, but they look kind of fairish or kind of period. And I just couldn't wait to get into real costume and just be there. Really, from the first day that I was there, it just felt good. It felt freeing and very romantic place to be.
You say your fair character was a seamstress?
Yes.
that reflect your reality at all?
I can sew. I mean, I would say I'm an intermediate sewer, and I'm sure there are people that were in St. George's Guild who were, making really incredible, complicated costumes. But I can sew my own clothes. I can sew decor items, things like that. So yeah, and I enjoy it. Particularly, you're at the fair, you're going to be hand sewing, which to me is very relaxing and meditative, and so I like doing that. Yeah.
Was there anybody who sort of took you under their wing and sort of guided you through the first couple of weekends at fair so that you felt comfortable?
In our group, there was this woman, her name was Hillary, and I don't remember her last name, but she was very warm and, she was supposed to be like the housekeeper in charge of the servants. And she could tell me what was what. And, also you remember we did classes so that we would have our language skills buffed up, things like that, getting into it. So I did a lot of that with her.
Were there special workshops for the court?
We definitely did our own rehearsals and worked on that, how court language would be different than peasant language, how your manners would be different, what would be expected of you dealing with different people at different class levels. Did a lot of our own rehearsal even before fair started, right? Even before the pre-weekends where you would get ready. We did a lot of other rehearsing.
Looking back, do you recall as the most prominent lesson that was given to you? For me, it was always like, always wear a hat.
Oh, like that? Good posture.
Really? Okay.
But those corsets make you sit up straight. You can't bend a lot in those. Particularly Elizabethan corsets are pretty unforgiving. In the real world, they were whalebone. In our world, we're using like metal stays. And
if you go out to fair these days, do you instinctually feel that you need pressure around your rib cage? Otherwise, you're just sort of phoning it in.
I think I would. I would feel weird not wearing a costume. But yeah, I would feel weird not having some kind of restrictive bodice.
No, was Louisa the queen when you were?
Peg, I think, was queen when I started, but then for most of the time that I was there, Louisa was our queen, yes. And I took classes with her too.
What impressed you most about both Louisa and the court when you were in it?
She just had a real sharpness to the character, very particular, very graceful. I mean, things that you would expect. And I think that the way she was portraying the queen was at kind of a pivotal age. She wasn't young. She wasn't the old queen that was, very cantankerous or something like that. She was just so poised and carried that off. And most of the people who played courtiers too just had this wonderful elegance about that created this feeling for people that they were really there.
And that these were sort of real people in charge.
Yes. And part of that, I think, comes from being comfortable in the clothing that we wore. You have to wear it and feel it like it's not a costume, it's your clothes. And then you move naturally in it, the way that the clothing will make you move.
And your role as a servant, to use theatrical terms, was to give focus. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say, but I would also say that we had our own character richness and depth of the characters that we played. But certainly when we were in that area that they called the glade with Big Tree and all of that, sure, we were creating that by being deferential, by sitting below and handing them things and stuff like that, sure. And that's more of young men. The grooms did more of that, I think, than the ladies' servants.
Why do you think that is?
They were just there because they're more prominent. They're more like, think of it this way. it's a different, much more modern period, but like think of Downton Abbey. Men servants serve the food, but you wouldn't have a housemaid in the dining room. So a girl who was a seamstress, she would be called upon to do certain things at certain times, but she wasn't going to be like standing right next to somebody who's important while they're delivering a speech or something like that.
Right. Skipping around a little bit, what aspects of your personality were attracted to being at the court as a seamstress?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know if I've like really consciously thought of it that way, because I got a lot of opportunities to be playful and be inventive. And, we would go and just perform, not be performing, but improving, bringing my little basket of sewing with other people. And you're sitting among the audience. Like we weren't on a stage so much, but we would be just go and sit on a hay bale next to people, customers who are eating with their kids, and just start interacting with them. The freedom to do that, to play like that, I think it was real attractive to me.
What was your
Kind of
character's name?
Anathea.
Did you get a similar kind of thrill sitting next to somebody and showing them your sewing and explaining how you did it?
Oh, I think for me that's really, this actual sewing was more of a prop.
Mm-hmm.
We were more inventing stories about our lives to people, talking about this or that naughty behavior that somebody got into, and how you could be punished or rewarded.
And did patrons by and large play along with you?
Yeah. Most of the people I interacted with, they did. They didn't shoo you away or something like that. They wanted that. I don't know if that's still true with the way it's done today. But yeah, I think people liked it. They liked getting the flavor of that. And the most fun with that, to me, that was really magical is using the language, using Elizabethan English.
And then seeing the light go on in their eyes when they sort of successfully translated what you were saying into something that they were cognizant of.
Yeah, that they could get, and then they would laugh. Yeah.
Did you have sort of a go-to bit of gossip that you would always use to sort of introduce yourself as you sat down next to a person eating a turkey leg and drinking ale?
No, I don't remember anything like that. No, we might have though. It seems like something that we did, but I can't remember like a specific thing.
Right.
It just you kind of immerse yourself in this world, and it just becomes natural.
The first morning that Denise took you to fair, how would you have described yourself?
Splendidly overwhelmed, sensorially overwhelmed, color and movement and activity of everything that's going on around you with the constant bagpipes in your ear. Yes, definitely splendidly overwhelmed.
How would you describe yourself before you got into the car to travel out to? The question I'm asking is, before you did fair, how would you describe yourself? Quiet, studious, outgoing.
No, I'm not a quiet person particularly, but I didn't really have a particular outlet for my creativity. I drew a lot. I did, art here and there. I don't know if I should say something this personal, but I was in a relationship with someone, my ex, who was not part of the fair and was very possessive and very restrictive of, like he would pick classes that I would take, things like that. So for me, the fair presented an escape from that and slowly from that relationship. So it was a big turning point for me in just finding my own way in the world, what I wanted to do and be without it being evaluated by him.
So if you had never done fair, how do you think your life would have rolled out?
I think I would have had 3 children and been divorced by 31, or
And
ended
what
up
would have been
supporting.
your occupation post-divorce?
What would have been?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I was already teaching. I was already a teacher when this came to fair. So I don't know. I probably would still be teaching. I'm happy, but when I went back to college and got an advanced degree and went from being a teacher to being a speech language pathologist in the school. So I'm kind of both. So I don't know if I would have gotten that far. I don't know if I would have gotten back and gotten my master's degree.
So if I got the chronology right, you went to fair, and then after fair, you went and got your advanced degree in speech pathology, and then you became a teacher in speech pathology. Is that correct?
yeah.
Was there something in speaking to people in BFA that translated into becoming a speech pathologist?
Um, just in the sense that I gained, I think, a lot of confidence about using my natural animated self, which I am very animated. It's performance, and teaching is performance also. And being a speech therapist, you have to be, if you're going to work with little kids, you have to be excited. You have to be excited yourself about the things that you're doing. You have to be able to hold something up and go, it's a red circle. I love it. What's your shape that you like? Right? You have to be into it or they're not going to connect and it's not going to bring them out. So I got some amateur acting chops.
I'm wondering if the process of learning to speak BFA has informed your ability to teach other people another language that's kind of like theirs, but not the exact same.
I don't know. I mean, one of the things that you have to deal with in language development is that some things will appear arbitrary. You can learn to call something else. Like one of these exercises my beloved Professor Hubble used to do is he'd take, like a shoe and a ruler, and he'd hand it to you, and he'd say, "Gork," and you're supposed to point at it and say, oh, "Gork," and he'd say, "Good girl," right? And the other one would be a schlung, or a bloof. You can make it anything, and you're teaching them to associate this thing with this symbol, with this verbal symbol. So maybe in that way, since there were some things that we had the names of that were antiquated items or archaic now, but
This is going a bit afar, but have you ever worked with adults in acquiring language skills later in life, like after a stroke? And have you ever noticed any difference between men and women?
I worked with adults and stroke patients and feeding patients just briefly in one of my internships, but I never worked with them once I got my master's. But I think, yeah, that's really frustrating. And I hate to be like all sexist and role focused about it, but I think for women in Western culture, we're raised to be adaptable, right? This is what you have to do. It's your job to do it, and you'll just do it. And sometimes for men, perfectly lovely men, but they're raised to think they've already got it, right? There's nothing they can't do. It's harder, I think, for men to acknowledge that there's something that they're not cool at.
I'm still kind of curious because I remember you had a very nice apartment in, like, was it Hollywood somewhere? Or I remember wood floors and a nice window.
Um, you're thinking of Rachel's house
Oh, okay.
because, and we talked about this at her funeral, who I still miss terribly every day. But I had lived, I moved a lot. Which is
Mhm.
a whole nother thing going on with me personally. But at one point, I lived around the corner from her and her sister Jane, in like a cool apartment, Art Deco kind of period apartment, and the ceiling fell in. It just like collapsed. So Jane and Rachel just would not hear of it. She just said, "You're moving in with us. You're living here. This is great." We moved all my stuff in, including this fabulous Wedgwood stove, which when I moved out, I said, "It's yours." She should get something for letting people live there. And she rescued many people over the years who were in transitional situations. So I think that's probably the place that you're thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very cool. It was like on Beechwood near Melrose, Larchmont Village, that area.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great place. And it was very fun too, to live there.
And I'm still trying to figure out how you ended up in Lord Burleigh's house. Was there
like being invited? That's, give credit again to Danise, who said, you could do this, you could do that. And I mean, she wasn't like, she hadn't been at the fair a long time either. She just said, let's do this. And because of who she is, really quick mind and really good at like scoping things out and knowing what's what and what's good about this or that situation. And she went, let's do this. And I did it with her. It's just really inspiring in that way. And again, because it gave us that flexibility to be all hoity-toity and to be, down in the trenches. So I'm sure it was her.
I have a similar memory of Denise being sort of a self-appointed recruiter for the fair.
Uh-huh. Well, she eventually, worked her way up into the actual, I guess, management parts of the fair. When we started, we were just out there acting and having fun. But yeah, and that goes with her personality. She's really good she has strong leadership skills, I would say. She can make things happen.
And that's one of the things that has always impressed me about the fair is that they got 1,000 people literally to give up 9 weekends in a row to go out to Agura and say Gaji Gooden to people paying money to come through this gate. And the older I get, the more in awe I am that they got so many people to buy into that milieu. What for you sort of made you buy into the fair mystique?
Well, because I love stories. I love stories. Like when you're reading a book that you really love, you're climbing inside it, right? This was like being inside of a book, being the book. And also, as a girl, it doesn't hurt that at the fair, there are a lot of people who have a lot of different looks, as opposed to a more mainstream world where you should have this certain shape and be this certain weight and only this kind of nose. And, there was just a lot more appreciation for how a person looked rather than more restrictive thinking about how they should look, comparing yourself to this or that. So I think that was valuable to me.
And the costumes, in a sense, were more flattering, I think.
Yeah, that's true. They are. Yeah. But look, some of us were very thin, some of us were in the middle, there were some very heavy people, but not just that, just the way that you were. You just could be fanciful, and for men too. They could be romantic and dashing and wear really cool clothes, and they didn't have to be super macho or just into really narrow things. You could be an interesting guy and be cool there, whereas in the outer world, perhaps you'd be seen as more, nerdy or whatever because of the things you liked.
The other thing that I appreciated about fair was that audiences there were very forgiving. And so you actually got a very constant supply of positive feedback from the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that if that applies to you?
I mean, I don't think it's occurred to me in exactly that sense. but it was happening all the time because
Right.
you're running over here and being entertaining, and then you're going over by some other booth and being entertaining and interacting. So yeah, it is. You're getting to do this close-up improv. But more than that, for me, it's we created together this whole other world, and we were inside it at the same time. So it was a valuable experience for us to be who we were and what we were doing than it was for customers who came there to eat turkey legs and drink beer and go to a few shows.
Has there been times that you've used your fair poise or fair bravado in your real life?
Well, yeah, I think I thought maybe I touched on that, and just that in what I do, it's performance, and
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at what's interesting around in this environment that can get this kid talking, and how will I make it interesting by being interested in it, right? By presenting it in a certain way. So I guess that's sort of similar.
I think so.
Okay.
When you were kind enough to say yes to this interview, was there a part of your brain that said, I've got to be sure to mention blah, blah, blah? And is there a blah, blah, blah in your past that you would like to mention?
I moved up here for grad school, and I hadn't been at the fair in quite a while, and I almost knew almost no one in Sacramento. And, Adam and Idris, the Taubers, live here. And because we were friends in a big group of people in that way, they extended themselves to me, and they've become my family here. And I haven't done a great job of keeping in touch with people. I'm certainly open to it, but I guess when I moved up here, there was no Facebook or anything, and people got busy. And so I'm not as close to people from fair as I would like to be, but I gained a whole family up here. I'm the auntie to their kids. They're like brothers. They're like family to me. Idris is like a sister. So the fair gave me that. It gives you other family in other ways too when you're there, right? You're part of a whole subculture that has its own sort of sensibilities and ways of talking when you're out of character. I don't know. We just seem to be really lively, alive, more engaged in life than maybe more mainstream people who haven't done something like this. Those are some blah blah blahs, I guess.
Well, blood, blood, blood. Congratulations. I'm going to finish off with yet another semi-improv sort of thing.
Okay.
Imagine a world that has the Phyllis Patterson Award for Lifetime Achievement in Fair. You have won this award. The band has been told to sit on their hands. You have as long as you like, but give me your acceptance speech to the Phyllis Patterson Achievement in Fair Award.
Goodness. Uh, I couldn't have done it without all of these other people. And then I would start naming them, right? I would name Denise, and I would name Rachel, and you, and Greg Moore, and Idris, obviously, and David. Hey, David, and Matthew. And Tom's in there too, just for being like an extended family. So I'm honored to have been there. It's just an incredibly important part of my life. I wouldn't quite be the person I am without that. Thank you so much.
That was very nice. I think I will stop recording now if that's okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Here we go. That was my September 2023 interview with Kayla Ahrens. If you have any comments you'd like me to pass along to Kayla, feel free to send them to me at djng@earthlink.net. Questions or comments about the podcast itself can also be directed to me at djng@earthlink.net. Finally, If you or somebody you know would like to be a guest on Fair Folk at Work, just feel free to email me at djng@earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.